YouTube, welcome back. This is the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and today we're going to do an impromptu video. So I wasn't originally going to capture the next process in a video, but I thought, well, July's been pretty slow in the modeling front, which if you've seen the July update, you realize not a whole lot happened. But I thought, you know, what better way to preserve what could be an absolute disaster than to do a video on it? So what you see in front of you is the remnants of a shorty or beer can tank car from Atlas. It's one of the older models from the original casting. I had 4 of these. 2 of them I've updated already and detailed, and I believe I either had a video of that or I mentioned it, so it's not, that's an old process. But what I did do is I got another set of tank cars, and this is actually a kit for a different size tanker car, but actually all the pieces are the same from nearest I could tell. So it was a mistake in ordering. Yes, I do make mistakes, but in looking at all the pieces and measuring everything out, it's going to work just the same, so we're going to roll with it. But so the gold medal parts, if you've watched, I've done 2 videos now. I believe one was for the tanker cars and the other one was for the Atlas, I'm sorry, the Walters 5-unit well car. And they really do make a hell of a difference in the way that the model looks, as opposed to these big bulky plastic details, which are great if the car's handled a lot. I would not recommend getting rid of those because it's impossible to break these. You almost have to try. However, the finer details that are included in this kit are, you know, simply brass, brass parts. I've already taken the liberty of spray painting them black, so that's why they're black. But they come as brass, so they're finer, they're more to scale, but they're also more fragile. So this is designed for something that is not going to be handled a lot by hands. So, all right, let's get started here. The reason why I wanted to do this video was this is going to be my first attempt at using my airbrush to weather the car. So tanker cars kind of receive an odd sort of weathering because they are cylindrical. So it's not like doing a box car or a gondola or something that's got sides and you can clearly define where the rust patterns would happen. So we're going to use the airbrush to sort of fade the top a little bit, add a little bit of a rust detail, and then also add some streaking down the side where the ladders and some are that would cause some rust along the side, and then also represent some spillage that may have occurred. And it's not all going to be done with the airbrush, so it's kind of a it's going to be a mixed bag here, but I've been using the airbrush a lot more. I really love it. If you don't own an airbrush, I would highly recommend that you look into getting an airbrush. There's a learning curve. I'm still learning. I've had it about 4 or 5 months now, and there's still a little bit of a trick to it. So definitely want to check that out and see how that process works. But once you get comfortable with it, it's going to revolutionize the way you do your models. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we've got our model here ready to go, and I've got my airbrush loaded. We are using a Vallejo color. It is number 70.992. It is a neutral gray. If you have not used the Vallejo paints, they are some of the best modeling paints that I have ever touched. They have great coverage, wide range of colors. They're more designed for the folks who are doing the war gaming and Dungeons and Dragons and all of that sort of other nerdy stuff, basically. But the paint quality is just absolutely fantastic. So I have amassed a rather large collection of these paints for the purpose of airbrushing mostly, but they're just great paints. So if you can afford to spend a little more on your paints, I highly recommend anything from the Vallejo line. They make 2 lines. One is a standard paint that you would use with your brushes. The other one is a designed specifically for the airbrush, so it's already thinned out a little bit. And I've used both with great success, and I've used both ink with great success through the airbrush. Once you sort of master that trick of thinning your paints. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take a kind of an aerial shot with my airbrush. So you're not going to really see what I'm doing, but very low paint, very high altitude basically on my brush. And my goal here is to just mist the model. So one thing you want to remember is when you start your paint, always start your air first, because you should be using a dual action airbrush. So you're going to start with your start the air off the model, start the paint off the model, and then once you get a nice flow, bring it across the model just like I'm doing now. I know you probably can't see the paint on the screen, but trust me, it is there. So I'm just moving back and forth over the model. My stop motion is occurring off of the model itself. So you never stop your brush on your model or start it on your model, always start off. And then I'm going to take a look and see if I have enough coverage here. One of the great things about airbrushing is that it dries very, very fast. So you can see a little bit here that we're starting to get a little bit of a gray build up. It's not quite as built up as I'd like it. I want to show a little more fading here, like this car's been on the line for a bit of time. So I'm going to apply another coat, get a little bit closer here to sort of bring that color down. Make sure I hit both sides of the model, and don't forget, of course, your end cap detail as well on the layout or the model. And I can start seeing that a little bit better. One thing I have learned about the airbrush, so I guess it's going to kind of be a tip for airbrush video as well, is that the colors can be very deceiving. So we've got a very nice gray going on here, so it's sort of faded out the color. You can see it's a little bit blacker on the bottom where the paint didn't get to, which is exactly the look that I'm going for here. So sun faded at the top, and then it fades down to back into black. My transition here is a little bit harsh. I don't know if you can see that as well with the shadow, because it's subtle, but it's a harsh subtle, so to speak. So I'm going to take the car on its side here just a little bit. And I'm going to even that line out. And as I was saying, you know, when you're working with an airbrush, it's not a lot of paint that you're applying each time. So your effects are subtle, and you need to be very careful with how you weather, because it's always easy to go back and add a little bit more paint. It's very difficult to take that paint back off. So once you get it looking kind of like the way you want it, which I think we did a pretty good job here. So I'm going to take you to an aerial shot here. So as you can see here, we've got a nice gray buildup. And as you come down the side here, it sort of fades off a little bit. So the car is still black, but it's a little bit faded, and that's the look that I'm going for. So now we're going to come in and we're going to add our rust details, and then we're going to do the same process here with our ladder. So let's go ahead and do. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit more indiscriminate here with this. So this is our metal kits, and I'm just going to hit everything with a little bit of a graying mist and get all of this sort of dulled down a little bit. One thing to remember with these metal parts, and I've tried a lot of different things between priming and coloring, it doesn't really want to hold the paint as well as I'd like, especially with a lot of handling. So we're going to have to touch all of this back up before we're done here. But that'll give us our parts with a nice little bit of graying to them. We can touch that up later. So we'll get the car assembled now, then we'll come back and we'll start with the brushing techniques. Now the assembly of this is just like the other videos. Carefully using a knife, we're going to cut all these pieces out. We're going to get it all assembled, and there's instructions with the kit itself. And it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you know where these things go. The only thing you may want to check is where you're placing your warning placards. But once again, quick reference to any of the online resources, and you'll see where those go. So I'm not going to show you assembling these parts because I've done that video already. But it's just a matter of taking your time, making sure you crease the metal in the right places, and that you're careful not to damage them. So we're going to go ahead and get this assembled. We'll come back for the rest of the detail. Okay, on to the next step here. I've got the cars built, so they are ready to go. That includes the little placards on the side, which we're going to paint red here in a moment. But before we get to that, we are using Vallejo number 71.080. It is simply rust. And the idea here is we're going to add a nice little streak of rust right down here in the center. We're going to streak it down the side a little bit right before we attach our ladders to the side of the vehicle. So I've already got that prepped in the cup, and all the mixes right now are simply the paint and the flow improver. I'm starting my painting off of the model and then bringing it straight across to get my final look. Once again, I'm going to come on to this side. I'm a little closer to the model than I was on the previous step because I want this to be a little bit more of a defined area. The colors are still subtle. It's not like I'm trying to oversaturate the model. I want it to be just a hint of the color. So I'm going to take you to the overhead here now and show you what that looks like. And you can just sort of see that brown stripe right down the center, and that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take that now and we're going to work it down the side. So we're going to start with this one you see right here in front of you. These two cars are exactly the same, other than the fact that one's got a different name on the side. It's otherwise the same model, and I am going just here on the side right by the ladder. In case you're wondering, I've got the pressure set to about 30 psi, and I'm controlling all of the action obviously at the gun. So it's not a whole lot of paint that's going on. In fact, I think the whole cup was 3 drops of paint, 2 drops of flow improver, and that's pretty much what we're working with here. Now, one thing I've noticed that a lot of people seem to complain about, and that is having to clean their airbrush after using it, even on a small little project like this. And all I can say is that if you are doing it right, it doesn't take very long. The gun breaks down fairly easily to be cleaned, and it's not really that bad. It's important that you do it every time, because if you don't, then you will clog up your needle, and then that's a little bit more of a problem, trying to get the caked on paint off the needle and off the off the inside of the nozzle. So don't delay that process. I'm just using our mix here to hit the walkways, which would see a lot more rust and weathering. And then we're going to spend just a small amount of time on the vehicle's undercarriage to get that sort of rusted up here. Now, I know that all of these colors probably aren't real visible to you. I'm going to be honest with you, they are a little difficult to see. I'm working in very light layers. That's obviously by design. And let's take you here so you can see what we look like. So this is what the model looks like now. You can see that we've got the faded color at the top, and then we've got just enough of the brown around the outside there to give a little bit of detail on the platform. And now it's time to go in with a little bit of a thicker paint. We're going to go over to a wash now, an enamel wash, and I'll show you what that's going to look like. Okay, so after I shut the camera off, I took another look at my model, and I realized, you know what, I want that stripe on the top to be just a little bit darker on this one model. So I went back and I put a little heavier line down the center there, And then this one I didn't darken up too much because I wanted it to look different, but it's a little bit, I hit it one more time with a quick coat. And then I thought, you know, the underside of these things, it's pretty nasty too. So I ran some of the rust color under there. You can see it on the bolster area where the trucks will attach, and then right down the center. So nothing exciting that you missed as far as the technique. It's basically just, you know, using the airbrush. But I did want to show you that I hit those two areas just so that you could see, and you don't go, hey, I missed a step. Okay, so I am going to take you back here. We're going back to AK Interactive and a color called Fuel Stains. So AK Interactive is this is AK number 025 in case you're looking right there for the model color. It's real popular with the folks who do the military models. In fact, that's what this this line is for, and I have found it very useful in model railroading as well, because we basically have the same amount of dirt and grime on our stuff that the Army guys do on theirs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this wash and we're going to sort of let it do its thing here. And I'm just painting it around the hatch. And although it's called fuel stains, and when it dries it is going to look like fuel stains. I use this typically when I'm detailing a locomotive because it's great on the fuel tank, you know, where there would be fuel stains. But I also want to put just a nice stripe of this stuff right down the side here to sort of represent maybe an overflow that occurred, or a leaky hose, something that would have triggered that fuel made its way, or some kind of chemical made its way down the side of this car. And when this stuff dries, it will it'll look exactly like spilled diesel fuel. So I'm just putting it around where realistically this would have splashed. I'm not going to do both cars because obviously, you know, you may not have had the same careless person loading more than one car that day. But just to keep a little bit of variation with the model, we're not going to do both of them. But when it's wet, it looks just like wet paint. It's more telling when that dries. So once that dries, we'll come back and I'll show you what the end result is there. All right, for our next step, we're gonna work through our trucks, and I've already taken the wheels out and masked off the bearings, which is something you're going to want to do as well. You could probably get by with being really careful, but don't recommend it. And if you get paint in the bearings, you are going to have a bad time. So just go ahead and take the little bit of modeling masking tape, get it in there and protect your bearings. Or you could put an old set of wheels in there that you don't care if they get painted. That would also work just as well. Got in my airbrush, we are using, this is a Vallejo gray. It's a gray black, or black gray as they call it, number 70.862. And I've just got some Vallejo thinner and airbrush flow improver in here as well. Just gonna hit the trucks and the, oh, gotta hang on to it. Gonna hit the trucks and the bolster pin area with this gray, and what I'm trying to do is bring out all of those lovely details that they model in for us that you can never see. So before we get too crazy with weathering and everything else, let's bring out the molded in details of the model itself, and let's make those shine a little bit. So you can do the couplers if you want. Definitely do the coupler boxes, but the couplers are going to get a coat of rust later that we'll paint on with a brush. So you don't necessarily need to hit the coupler itself. I'm just using mine as a holder. Although these paints are acrylic, if you don't like getting paint on your hands, you can always buy gloves. Obviously that doesn't bother me a whole heck of a lot, as you can tell, because I'm just pretty much painting it as it is. So, gonna hit the underside here as well. Just make sure everything's nice and painted. And once again, this is probably about 3 drops of paint, and I'm able to do everything that I need to do. So it does not take a lot of paint. The advantage of doing this is you get to see all of those details that are normally they're on there, but because the trucks are black, they just sort of disappear in the shadows when you're looking at your trains on the layout. So just going to go ahead and give these another quick coat, make sure everything's nice and gray. That's going to be our base for everything else. And then from there, we are simply going to switch over to our brush at this point, and we're going to do some old school rust techniques to get the rust detail out. Now, to do that, I am going to once again go back to the AK Interactives, and of course they have a wash for that. Okay, we are using AK Interactives AK013. This is the Rust Streaks, and this is simply another wash, much like the fuel stains, except it is rust colored. And we want to hit the areas that would typically rust. So let's get it in our springs, let's get it around our bearings a little bit, and we don't need to go crazy with it. So make sure you do both sides. Yes, I almost forgot the other side. And just hit that in there. With the washes, they will seek their own level. So if you just sort of tap the brush to it, it'll eventually leach out to hit wherever you want. And if you want to hit another, add some stripes of running rust, by all means, this is the place to do it. And don't feel like you've got to make both sides match. In fact, both sides should not match, because on the prototype, they are not going to match. They're going to weather differently on each side. So I'm using this to bring out the details, but I'm not going to be real careful as to what I'm doing with it. I just want to hit roughly the same spot on each car, but not necessarily in the same way, if that makes sense. So you should end up with something that looks a little bit like that. And if you got the more modern trucks, something that looks just like that. And, I like a little bit more rust down here. So we'll just hit that one more time. Once again, be careful not to make it look too uniform, because in real life it would not be. So sort of randomize your brush strokes if you can. And also the amount of paint that you have on it, so that you get something that looks a little bit unique. And here I'm just going to spread out some of this. I had a lot of rust right there, so we'll spread that out. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll get our car assembled. That'll make the next couple of steps a little bit easier with all the parts and pieces together. Okay, so we've pretty much got our cars assembled at this point, and our next step is to do some of the detail work by brush. And what I mean by the detail work, because there's not a ton of it, but you do have to paint the couplers. And so I am using a rust color here. It's not actually rust. It is a Vallejo 70846. It's a mahogany brown, so it's kind of a dark brown, rusty looking color. And I'm just going over the coupling. One thing that you got to be careful of, and I basically did without much regard, I painted the whole coupler, and of course you know that the coupler separates in two pieces, and I know that's pretty much standard in HO and N scale. I'm pretty sure, and I can't tell you about some of the other scales, but there's a nice little separation somewhere on it where the coupler actually opens up so that you can uncouple your cars. And no matter how careful I am, I always end up somehow getting paint to jam the mechanism. So it's not really a big deal once you get your car painted. Right before you put it on the layout, just separate the two pieces by hand. Be gentle. They will pull back apart, and then once you clear them, open them up, they are pretty much ready to go. So we're gonna hit the inside here, make sure that there's no black showing, and that'll give it a little more realistic touch. So we've got one more step. We're gonna take a red here, and we're gonna paint the placards. They're too small to really worry about the text, so we're not gonna worry about that. But we'll go ahead and do that, and then that's pretty much it. We're ready for the glamour shots. Okay, so we are wrapped up here, and I painted the warning placards just a simple red. I used a Vallejo 70.926, simply red, and then I also painted the very end of the air hoses, or trip pins, whatever you want to call them. They're supposed to model air hoses, and that is to symbolize the connection between the two hoses. Once again, I used a Vallejo paint. This is it's Whiz Kids, but it's by Vallejo, and the color is silver 80.052. So you don't have to necessarily use the colors that I used. I just wanted you to see what colors I used, so that if you wanted to follow step by step, you could get the same colors. But let's do a recap here. So these are the finished cars. I personally am very happy with the way they came out. I think the airbrushing technique worked very well for these models. I got the look that I was looking for. I've got a nice faded color on the top, and I have that brown rush streak right down the center of the car, around where the ladders are, and that pretty much matched the prototype photos that I had. I've got the couplers painted, the trucks painted, and then of course the warning placard. So I'm happy with the end result here that I got on these cars. I think that is definitely a technique that I will keep and apply to other tank cars in the fleet. And as far as some lessons learned, you got to be very careful with your airbrush. Just make sure that you're keeping an eye on it and you're going slow. And what I mean by slow is build your paint up in layers, thin layers. Don't try to paint it all in one brush stroke. You're going to be disappointed. But if you build it up in layers, I'm finding out that the colors are a lot more controllable. They look a lot better, and you get a lot more of a realistic result from them. So that's probably my biggest advice. The second thing that I would say is give it a shot. So this was my first time airbrushing a model, and I took a chance because I took a chance that I would obviously screw the model up. I did not use a sidelined car. Basically, I used a car that's on the railroad, and so basically just went for it. Also, the metal kits, the gold metal upgrade kits. These tank cars are actually really old. I got these back, I think, when I was still living in my parents' house. So, these cars have got to be 10, 15 years old now. So they're ancient, basically, as far as model railroading goes. But, they're Atlas cars, and they're good, and you can still get them, as far as I know. They're still being made. And I don't know about the gold metal kits. I think they're still available. You just got to find them. Everything's hard to find now, so it's a bit of a search. But they really go, if you've got cars that are not coming off your line, and you're not trying to take them to train shows or to friend's house or anything like that. They're sitting on your own personal railroad. I think these metal kits are great. I mean, they just take the place of this. This plastic is great. It's durable. But it is nothing in comparison to the realism you get from the metal kit. I mean, you just get it's just not as bulky. So, that's a lot to be said for upgrading the kits. But when you take the upgraded kit and you put it with that nice little bit of weathering, boy, it really brings out this model. So, very happy with the way this came out. If there's anything that you have question-wise, I'm really learning a lot about airbrushing, and some of it I'm learning because I'm making mistakes along the way, and some of it I'm learning just by watching other folks out there who are doing it. So if you've got any questions about the process or anything that I did, or I don't think I skipped too many steps here, so you should have seen pretty much everything. But if I skipped over something that you'd like a little more clarification on, go ahead and leave me a message down in the comment section, and I'll get you an answer. Okay, I will be doing more videos as I continue to develop my weathering techniques, and as I do more cars. They probably won't all be how-tos. It'll basically be showcase pieces. Here's what I've done, but stay tuned for those as I work through my fleet.